everyone, and good morning to our select committee, 20th of October. Hope everybody's staying safe and keeping well. And as you know, we're going to go into a few more weeks now of some different measures. So hopefully we'll come out of that a little bit better than what it is at the moment. Good morning to officers, Ian and Louise. You're going to go through the two reports with us this morning. I'll just go through what members we have on the team here on the select committee, and then just introduce yourselves as officers, and then my two scrutiny officers then will introduce themselves. So I'll start myself. I'm Simon Howarth. I chair Adult Select Committee. I represent Gilwyn, Clydach and Llanelli Hill, and then I'll take it around the table and whoever wants to come in next. Thank you. Okay, Sheila.
Hello, good morning. I'm Sheila Woodhouse, member for Growfield Ward in Abergavenny and member of this committee.
Ruth.
Hello, I'm Maureen Powell. I'm a councillor for Castle Ward in Abergavenny and a member of this committee.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm County Councillor Ruth Edwards, elected member for Latilio Cresceni and also a member of the Adult Select Committee. Thank you.
Morning, Councillor Roger Harris, Grossonan Ward in Abergavenny and member of this committee.
Good morning, Martin Grokert. I'm the elected member in Lansdowne Ward in Abergavenny and I sit on this committee.
Good morning, Councillor Louise Brown, Shire Newton Ward and Vice Chair of this committee. Thank you.
Good morning, Councillor Paul Pavia, elected member for Larkfield Ward in Chepstow and a member of this committee.
Okay, I think that's members introduce themselves, just the two officers with us, and I think Bob's just joined us, Councillor Greenland, Cabinet Member. Good morning, Bob.
Good morning, Chair. Yes, a visiting member, Cabinet responsibility for housing.
Good morning. For the two officers, just introduce yourselves, please. Just then we, members of the public, then know who you are and what your portfolios are, please.
I'm Louise Corbett from the Housing Strategy team.
And I'm Ian Bakewell, Housing and Communities Manager.
Thank you both, and good morning to you, and welcome to our meeting, and thank you for your reports. We'll get straight into the meeting now. Apologies for absence, Hazel. Do we have anybody reference to apologies?
No, we don't, Chair.
All right, thank you, Hazel. Declarations of interest, as and when, members, if you feel that you uncomfortable with anything being discussed as reference to the items on the agenda, just raise your hand and we'll take that as a declaration then, and we can sort the formalities out later on, or you withdraw from the meeting if you feel it's within the scope of that. Right, open public forum. I don't think at the moment we have anybody who is wanting to speak on the open public forum. So if we have, we'll just give it a few seconds. I think we're waiting for Tony to join us. We have a couple of members on this committee who are co-opted members. We have Tony Cross and another lady who is, I haven't met the lady before. Is she back on? Has she come back on there, Hazel?
Yes, I believe they've both joined.
Chris Boy. Chris, do you want to just introduce yourself as well, Chris, please?
I am Boy. I'm the Chief Exec at Mind Monmouthshire and I'm a co-opted member of this committee.
Good morning, Chris.
Thank you.
Right, so we've got the two co-opted members. Tony's trying to contact us as reference to trying to get on, so he may join us at a later date. Okay, a time, sorry.
I believe Tony's here.
He's here. Good morning, Tony.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm sorry it took me so long to arrive.
Okay.
My name is Tony Crowhurst and I'm a co-opted member of this committee, and I work with the Disability Advice Project based in Cwmbran.
Oh, thank you, Tony. Right, we've just gone through the formalities now, so we'll go into agenda item number 4, which is Home Search Allocation Review and Policy Amendments, which will go to the Cabinet, and in brackets Cabinet Member, reference to after our scrutiny of the report. Are you going to take this report, Ian? Okay.
Sorry, Louise is going to do that.
Louise, do you want to run us through the report, and then members may have some questions for you later, okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning, everybody. So just to give you some background, is a requirement of the Housing Act and the Housing Wales Act that the council runs a housing register which manages the letting of social housing. As part of our legal responsibility, it's also necessary for us to undertake periodic reviews to ensure that the allocation policy meets the needs and priorities of Monmouthshire and reflects current legislation and case law. So we started this review in 2019. And due to lockdown, COVID is being completed very recently. And we basically are looking at, is the policy fit for purpose? Is it effective? Does it do everything that we need it to do to help the residents of Monmouthshire in relation to access and affordable housing? So as part of the review, as well as all the legal side of it and good practice, we also considered quite a lot of consultation feedback, and that included people that had recently been rehoused or were waiting on the register, as well as stakeholders, support staff, colleagues in social care. So from that consultation period, from all the research that we had done as well as staff, quite a few recommendations have come out in terms of the policy and making amendments. Some of the headline policies are in relation to local connection. So we are recommending tightening up the local connection criteria. So we're going to increase the local connection criteria, if approved, from rather than it being somebody living in the borough for 12 months out of the last 24, is now to out of the past 3 years. And the thinking behind that is it helps people that are very established and settled in Monmouthshire and prioritises them over others. We're also considering the banding system, and to simplify it for our service users, we're reducing the number of bands down from 7 to 5. We've done some work around people that are in the armed forces and veterans. So we are suggesting giving a higher banding to those that are being discharged from the armed forces, and they would have a high priority for housing, whereas at the moment it's only currently a medium priority. And that aligns itself with the Armed Forces Covenant that we're signed up to and looking to support. And then there's some other things that link to the homelessness pressures and our homelessness work. So one of them is letting quotas. We are suggesting the ability to have flexible quotas. So what that means is if there's a particular pressure on the system somewhere, we can either decrease or increase the amount of properties that are allocated in each quota, and thereby target those properties at the groups that may need it most, or less as it may be. We're also including a rapid rehousing protocol. So what this means is basically it links to the Welsh Government Phase 2 planning guidance for homelessness and housing related support, and is agreement between the council and all our partner RSLs that are signed up to Home Search to move a homeless person from temporary accommodation into permanent accommodation as soon as possible. So there's certain things that we would do around that. So that includes working in partnership to identify suitable property, and then is putting support in place to support that person then in their permanent tenancy and identify any support needs, and obviously manage that transition and hopefully not have any issues. The review, it touched on the policy, but we also looked at like the IT system, policies and processes. It was quite a wide-reaching review. So as part of our work, there's also going to be improvements to the IT home search system. So it's going to improve the user experience. We're going to be much more digital. There's going to be like a mobile app. It's just going to be much more what you would expect really when dealing with an organisation online. We're also going to look to use autoband, which will free up officer time. So the straightforward applications would be able to be banded automatically, and then that frees up officer time then to focus on the more complex cases and do other work. And we've got IT upgrades that will allow all of that. We're also looking to simplify the application process in terms of forms that applicants fill out. A lot of our feedback was about how complicated home search could be, the number of forms, the number of paperwork. So we've done a lot of work around simplifying all of that and make it as easy as possible as well. There's going to be things like live chat. So yeah, it's a far-reaching review that doesn't just deal with the policy amendments, but we're here to talk about the policy amendments today. And there isn't anything there, I don't think there's a significant change. From our perspective, they're just small tweaks. It's just going to make the system better for everybody, really. So in terms of our legal obligations, it's going to support us as a council. It's hopefully going to support residents that are most in housing need to access the affordable accommodation. So, like I say, the recommendations are there. There is some resource implications with this. Okay, so that includes the IT upgrade. It includes our ongoing fee to the Monmouthshire Home Search Partnership because they administer the waiting list on our behalf. And there's also some finance and some money around the Welsh side of things. We need it to be compliant with the Welsh Language Act. There's going to be some additional things there as well. But that, in a nutshell, is the allocations review. So I'm wondering if you've got any questions, if there's anything specifically you'd like me to talk about.
Okay, thanks for that, Louise. Members, any questions to Louise there? Right, I've got Ruth, and then Tony.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, Louise. When you said about the services, and we've always accommodated ex-service people, but there's no mention of prisoners, if they tend to be, say, in some of our, because we've got prisoners in this county, are they stated as long-term, short-term, whatever? If they are coming out, do we sort of think of accommodation for them if they wish still to stay in Monmouthshire? And the other question is about being a mobile app, when a lot of people in, very financial restraints, if they haven't got a mobile phone or things like that, who do they go to get support for looking for accommodation? Because not everybody, well, even in this neck of the world where I live, there's very poor mobile signal anyway. So would they be guided? I just don't know, where would they be guided to get with, which is, yes, the young are very digitally minded, but they don't all have the ability maybe as well to, help their case. So I just want a couple of those answers. Thank you, Louise.
In relation to the first point, and prisoners that may be in Esk at the moment, being in prison doesn't give somebody a local connection to the area. So they would be asked to go back to the area that they were living before they were placed in Esk prison. So we don't see that as being something that we need to specifically state in the policy, because they just wouldn't meet the criteria as not classed as settled or permanent accommodation. Absolutely, in relation to the digital side of things, I think that's a really valid point. And we're very aware actually that in Monmouthshire, there are a lot of young people on the waiting list. We also have a lot of perhaps older people on the waiting list, or people that are vulnerable and are not able to self-serve and, be on an app and do everything online. So nothing has changed in relation to the team being available. If there was somebody that did have issues around that, the phone number is still there for the home search team. There's still officers that can, facilitate any work and help and things like that that's needed via the phone. You can still write a letter and have a response. So none of that has ended. I think it's just making us more efficient, at a time when everything is becoming more digital, more online, and there's a lot more that we could do to help staff and help those residents that are able to work on a more digital basis. But like I say, the previous arrangements are still there, and certainly, it wouldn't be something that we would see as a barrier or something stopping somebody from having access to home search or any of the services home search offers.
Thank you, Louise. And one other thing, I'm glad to see where you've got more flexibility in the quota, because obviously now with COVID, things are going to fluctuate with the need a great deal now in the foreseeable future by the look of things anyway. So I'm glad you've got that flexibility there. Thank you, Louise.
Absolutely. I mean, a key aim of the review was that we could build a little bit of flexibility into the policy, and that it was robust and that it would respond to challenges. So we really feel that with the proposed amendments, it does cover us off quite well in that regard as well.
Okay, thanks, Louise. I have Tony and then Louise, member, please. Tony.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose my overall question is whether an equality impact assessment has been carried out on the entire policy. I suppose I should tell you that I've been on the board of Mellon Hounds for 15 years and more latterly on the board of Monmouthshire Housing for 3 years. And I also work with the Disability Advice Project. So my background is working with disabled people and social housing. So my question about whether an equality impact assessment has been held goes to the heart of this, because I've got a lady, and Ian has spoken to her, who has been sofa surfing for over 1.5 years now, but is still at the bottom of the list for getting social housing. Now, I notice with some pleasure that the relevant clause in the 2016 policy said that nobody with savings over £50,000 is likely to receive an offer of accommodation. So my question, that has now changed to over 16,000 with capital assets over 50,000, but that can be trumped by if you have a medical priority. Now, I think that this is in many ways inequitous between various people. I sent a paper around, I don't know if you've all read it, but I make the point that the sums of money that are being included here mean different things to different people in different parts of the county. Say £50,000 saving in Chepstow, if you're trying to get accommodation, means a lot less than it does if you're in Clydach or Llanelli Hill. The ability to obtain housing in the various areas is very different across the whole of Monmouthshire. So I feel that a figure in any form of figure that is only in there as a straight sum to cope with the whole of the county is completely wrong. I'll go further than that. If you are 60, 65, your ability to get a mortgage is minimal. So it doesn't matter if you've got £50,000 in the kitty, let's say, you won't get a mortgage around Chepstow because you won't have enough years left to obtain a property. So I think that if an equality impact assessment hasn't been held on this policy that takes account of disabled people and older people, then I think that the whole thing should be looked at again. So I ask, my overall question is whether an equality impact assessment has been held. Now, my second bit that goes on from that is whether what's been proposed ties up with the proposals of Future Wales, the national plan for 2040. I've done an analysis of the houses that have been built in Monmouthshire in the last 5 years to find that about 18 or 19% of them have been social housing and 82% have been market housing. Now, the Future Wales policy from the national government says that that proportion should be 45% social housing and 55% market driven. Now, there's nothing in the policy which intimates to me that Monmouthshire has any policy which is going to change fundamentally those values. Somewhere out there must be some evidence to say which part of the population is wanting all these houses that we're being told need to be built. They aren't all going to be 4-bedroom properties. Some of them have got to be 2-bedroom and some of them have got to be available for downsizing. And I see no guidance that Monmouthshire is giving to any market to illustrate that we're going to conform to the requirements of Future Wales. I know I gabbled on a bit there and I do apologise, but I feel quite hot about this. So thank you for letting me have my say. Thank you.
Okay, that's great, Tony. Thank you. Louise, would you like to answer question 1? I think question 2, Bob, have you anything on that one? Because like LDPs and things like that, where we are reviewing there, Bob, aren't we? So Louise, can you answer Tony's first question about the allocations there? And
yeah, in relation to the equalities impact assessment, there was one done and it should be attached with the reports pack. Okay, this is online for this. So we did do an impact equality assessment and we looked at everything. When it came to looking at the figures, so like the £45,000 per annum, that would mean you would have sufficient financial resources to secure your own accommodation, and then the capital assets and things like that. What we tried to do was to look at a Monmouthshire average rather than do it area by area, because part of the aim of this is to actually simplify the process. So we didn't want to get too sort of drawn into in Chepstow it might be this, and in Abergavenny it might be this. So we looked at the Monmouthshire average. So we did look at the Monmouthshire average property price, the Monmouthshire average private rental price, and all of that data was fed in to coming up with those figures and what we feel is like a reasonable amount of money to be able to solve your own housing issues if you were to experience one, because it's not all about purchasing a property. It could be the private rented sector that could be an option, and that sort of income would allow you to access the private rented sector. But certainly I take some of your comments on board in terms of if you're older, it would be difficult to get a mortgage and be able to purchase a property outright. I can see where you're coming from.
Okay, thanks for that, Louise. And the other aspect of that then, Louise, is this will be points scored as well, won't it? So whether there'll be all the other factors come into this as well, won't they, with reference to the allocation as well? So you may... you may, so I don't know the point scoring of it, but it will be, that will maybe a minus for somebody, but on the other hand, there may be pluses. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a needs-based system. So what we would do is, you know, if somebody was fit and healthy and had those assets, we probably would say you've got sufficient financial resources, you're going to be in the lowest band 5. However, if somebody come to us with, you know, a welfare need or a medical issue, or we're struggling in some way, then the flexibility built into the policy now allows a little bit of discretion whereby that can be looked at. So, for example, if somebody had a medical issue but was, you know, had capital assets of over 50,000, it may well be that the outcome of that would be that they would have a higher banding to reflect the medical issue. And as part of their assessment, we would look at like where they're living, are they able to get a mortgage, what is their age? So that would all be built into the assessment process for that individual person.
Okay, thanks, Louise. Anybody want to just, Bob, do you want to just come in on the delivery of affordable homes within Monmouthshire?
Yeah. Tony makes some very good points there. And of course, at the moment, we're in the middle of the process of building a new local development plan, a replacement local development plan. Unfortunately, our plans have been much delayed by the pandemic, and they are still likely to be delayed into the future. But that is the way in which we deliver new housing into the future, obviously. And the problem we've always got in Monmouthshire is that developers want to build large 4-bedroomed houses, as you quite rightly say. So we have to build in policies which give us much more control in the future of what is built. There is, of course, an absolute problem that we have in meeting the Welsh Government guidelines on the 45-55 split. Because we know that even in Monmouthshire, where developers are really anxious to build, the being able to go into partnership with, or at least put it this way, getting a developer, a commercial to developer, to deliver that level of social housing is obviously an impossibility. They're not going to do it. And you made reference to the numbers of social housing we've been building in the past. Very disappointing when we had we had ideas that we would get to 30% social housing. But the way all of these happens is when a commercial developer comes along and they then look at a site, they will then, put it nicely, negotiate with a local authority and say, well, look, we can't possibly, there are extenuating circumstances on this site, we cannot deliver that numbers of affordable houses. So either the site stays vacant, and this of course has been what has been happening in Monmouthshire, or else you negotiate whatever you can in terms of social housing. Now that's no longer going to be the case, because we already know, because we have worked with Melin and Monmouthshire Housing, and I'm sure that in the future we will, as far as as land owned by Monmouthshire County Council is concerned that goes into the LDP, we will be looking to deliver and work with our housing associations so that we can achieve the level of affordable housing, social housing that we need. Unfortunately, of course, when you consider the LDP, you cannot give preference in deciding which sites are going forward to the sites owned by the county council. You have to look at it and decide which sites are on merit the best to put new housing. And so it is a tough ask when we look into the future, but we are well aware of the issues that Tony has brought up, and planning officers in bringing forward our policies for the new LDP will be looking very much at how we can deliver the social housing that we need, and we do need it. I have to say, we are not helped by the fact that the Welsh Government in their National Development Framework believe that housing in South East Wales should be very much along the area where the metro is and up in the Welsh Valleys. So their national development framework, as it stands at the moment, is trying to prevent houses being in Monmouthshire generally. We're really up against it, and but we are working as far as we can to try and achieve the level of social housing which we know we'll be talking about housing lists later on, which we know are there and we need them.
Okay, thanks for that, Bob. That's really great. Gives a better perspective. I've got Louise, and then I've got Ruth wants to come back in. Tony, you've just gone off again. If you want to just come in, Louise, please.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, looking at the policy as a whole, you know, I do think it's a good idea to make the form more easy to fill in, and I think, you know, that's a good point. And obviously, you know, if you can do it through mobile phones and so forth, but obviously allowing for the flexibility of those who don't have access, presumably, to help fill in the forms over the phone or at the hubs. The question I've got is really about the allocations policy itself. If you look at page 7, I think it talks about Band 1 and the Army veterans, which is understandable, but I'm just wondering whether or not consideration is also being given to care leavers, because obviously, you know, care leavers are very vulnerable as well when they've left a care home, and you know, they get to that age when they're left on their own. And I think it's something that the Children and Young People's Committee did actually look at, and you know, that they did indicate that there was going to be quite a lot of support for them. The other question I've got is about whether the policy should include about medical need, you know, either physical or mental need. You know, for example, if you know, somebody is disabled, then you know, stairs may be a problem and so forth. So I'm just wondering whether there should be a bit more attention given to that particular aspect. And the other thing is it's just a very minor thing, but it's on the, if you look at page 12, I think it is, it says on what in the middle of there, it says I think under it says a period of at least 5 years at the time of application or in the past, but on page 13, where it's in yellow under D, I think it should also add at least 5 years at the time of the application or in the past, just to make that particular point clear. I mean, it's the same thing, but it's a bit more clarified in one of the points than the other.
Okay, thanks for that, Louise. Louise, would you like to comment?
Yeah, absolutely. Care leavers are awarded high priority needs. They always have been. We have really good links with social services, and we're trying to do even more work around our social services at the moment. So as soon as a young person is, you know, ready to leave foster care or wherever it may be, there is support given in terms of their rehousing and them having a priority status to be able to move on quite quickly through the system into permanent housing. So that is done. In relation to the medical need, it does address the medical need. So we look at people's mental health conditions, we look at people's physical health conditions. So if somebody is saying that they have a medical condition that makes them vulnerable, there's a medical questionnaire they fill out. And then that is usually we ask for like doctors' information as well, just to confirm what the situation is. If there's a physical disability, an occupational therapist will look at it and make recommendations in terms of the housing, the level of need, what sort of housing they will need. So that is all done as part of somebody's application, and we look at what the need is, and without a doubt medical is looked at as well as care leavers, absolutely, yeah. And in relation to your final point, I would have to look back at the policy, but certainly I'll write that down and we'll have a look at whether or not that does need to be sort of reinforced again. Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, could I just ask a further question, because I'm not quite clear how the sort of medical need in terms of a physical or mental need actually comes in the banding process.
Well, it depends upon the level of their need. So when somebody registers, they would be asked a question like, have you got a physical disability or a physical issue? They would then give information as to that. So like I say, we would ask for some medical information from the doctors, from consultants, from anybody that might be supporting them. And then based on the information that comes back, an assessment is made as to whether that means that they're a high need, they're a medium need, or even a low need, because medical need will only be taken into consideration if their current living conditions are unsuitable or making that medical need worse. If where they live is perfectly suitable for them given their current needs, they would have a low banding, they would be in the lowest band. But if they needed to be rehoused on medical grounds, then where they would sit, whether that's like low or medium or high, would depend entirely upon the severity of their condition. But that is done on a case-by-case basis.
So would the policy be better to say that somewhere, that the assessment of medical, the banding in relation to the assessment of medical need is based upon the need, you know, effectively? Would it be better to have a sentence within the policy to say that or not?
Yeah, the final policy will allude to that. Obviously, for the attachment, all I've given you is the changes to the current policy, but absolutely, that's something that we can look at again if you think that would be worth you know, looking at and writing down in more detail. But is a given, you know, as a case-by-case basis. So like I say, we don't say these conditions would entitle you to high need or these conditions to low need. It depends entirely upon how it impacts on that person. It depends upon their current housing situation. So that's something that's worked out when we've got all the evidence back. And like I say, for anything in relation to like physical health conditions, an occupational therapist is part of that decision-making process as well.
I mean, I would have thought they're quite important needs actually, but okay, thank you.
Thanks for that. Could I just ask then, do you have an appeals do we have an appeal if somebody's totally not satisfied with the direction? Do they have a right to appeal on the decision? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody, any element of the application process or a decision about withdrawing, you know, a property offer, anything like that is all subject to review. They just need to contact the home search team and request that, and that would be done. Yeah.
All right, thank you. I got let me have a look now. I've got Roger and then Chris. Roger.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, just following up from what Bob was saying about allocation of affordable housing and for what Tony was saying, there is in our LDP provision on large sites in the north for 35% affordables and in the south 25%. But as Bob has said, we on the planning committee pass a site for building, and before long the developers come back, invoke the district valuer, who's definitely not on the side of social housing, and it's demonstrated that the developers can't possibly put that amount of affordable housing on. We have no comeback after that. As Bob said, we either say you can't develop it, or maybe we should be stronger there and say, right, you know, if you're not going to do it, we won't let you have planning permission, and see what else comes along. But the developers really do have a strong hand here, and we need some sort of if you like, backing from the Welsh government to say that private developers can't get away with the rubbish that they do get away with. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks. I got Chris. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got one question I'd like Louise to clarify, please, and that was around Ruth's question about prisoners. You mentioned that somebody who is incarcerated in Monmouthshire does not have the right to reside in Monmouthshire, but what about Monmouthshire residents incarcerated outside of Monmouthshire? And you know, that local authority where the prison is would signpost that prisoner back to Monmouthshire, but if that prisoner's just done 5 years, they have no legal right to residency in Monmouthshire. Can you just, is that right, or am I just being a bit daft there?
No, it's kind of right. You're exactly right in what you're saying. So if a Monmouthshire resident was in prison outside of Monmouthshire, that wouldn't entitle them to any sort of housing status in the local authority area where they are in prison. So they would be referred back to Monmouthshire. I mean, we have got local connection criteria, and obviously 5 years is the standard that we look at, but there is discretion. So if somebody come to us and obviously on their application would say that they've been in prison for quite a long time, we would then be looking at their address history prior to going into prison, whatever that might have been. So we would look to establish a local connection or see where that is. So it wouldn't be a barrier to somebody accessing housing as long as they could evidence their address history prior to them being taken into prison, whatever that may have been.
Thank you, Louise. Thanks, that's clarified that for me.
Right, I've got Ruth and then Tony. Ruth?
Right, yes, thank you. That's a good point that you've raised there, Chris, about the prisoners, because obviously it depends on the category the prisoner is in, where they tend to spend their holiday, so to speak. But also with Bob saying about, we're doing the revision of the LDP, and I think it's well known that people, and we're all in that category, if we are very lucky, we get older, but our needs change. And I don't think we do build enough bungalows, and not just bungalows, but accommodation where they're of a size where they could accommodate a wheelchair and things like that, that's sometimes lacking, and where they could have independent living for a lot of the time. But then if they were ill or needs change or something, that there is 2 bedrooms so that they definitely can have somebody there to stay or whatever to accommodate help when it's needed. And I don't think that we're addressing enough of a problem that we've got with Monmouthshire being well known to have quite an aged population, and it looks as though it's not going to sort of change. So I think if we're doing the LDP, we need to definitely look at what our need is going to be. And I understand where Roger's coming from with the district valuer. We don't get much help from that corner. And of course, if they can sell more market housing, but we do have quite a good criteria in Monmouthshire where we do pepper point our affordable housing, and so that they don't turn into ghettos and things like that, like they do in some parts of the country. So I think it's quite a lot to take on board when we do have some of these things come before us in planning in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ruth. Tony?
I would like to praise Councillors Brown and Edwards for the eloquence with which they've just spoken on behalf of disabled people. I would just like to query something that Louise Corbett said earlier on, and she alluded to the ability of disabled people to obtain a private rental accommodation. For many years, that has been a big issue. The particular person I referred to earlier on, we've had a full OT assessment, which completely supports her claim from somewhere else, and she's still the bottom of the list. She's been sofa surfing for 1.5 years, and she's still bottom of the list. She lives in Caldicott. The nearest place that I could find for her with private accommodation that would suit her needs was in the Forest of Dean, and that was 45 minutes from her circle of support. That is not an equitable policy. What should she do? Should she make herself homeless? I asked the question. So I will still query the putting in of a figure of sum of money, because I think the idea of making an average across a county as big as Monmouthshire with its such varied populations is just anathema to what it should be. It should be on a basis of what you've got, where you are and your age. And the points thing that Louise Corbett told us about, I can't see that anywhere in here, and I can't see where someone who is sofa surfing gets 10 points because they're going to be out on the street. I mean, I'm just upset that the idea of an average for somewhere like Monmouth is just got to be wrong, and it needs to be changed. And the fact that somebody sofa surfed with an OT report is still bottom of the list means the system's failing. I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit heated about this, but that's how I feel. Thank you, Ken.
Okay, Tony, thanks for that. I've got Roger. You've got your hand back up, Roger. Yeah.
No, Chair, sorry, I
Okay,
forgot to take it down. I'll do that.
Okay, right. To round that, has anybody got any more comments to make as reference to the report for the officer? Right, let's. Right, Ian. Sorry, Ian. Yeah, you want to come on board, Ian? Thanks.
I just want to just come back a bit with in terms of Tony's comments. Obviously, it is very difficult in terms of when you're developing a policy and procedure, in terms of getting every circumstance correct, and obviously so what there is within the policy is there is flexibility to give discretion as and when if needed. I think the point that Tony's raising about the particular individual, we've responded to the query, and the policy will support the individual. But going along, the policy does things change, and we can look at things as we're going along. We don't necessarily. Sometimes we need to, depending on the scale of any change, we might need to defer it. But if there's something that we can adjust as we're going along, we will. And there's an open invitation to Tony to liaise with us on an ongoing basis around any aspects of the policy. We're happy to use Tony as a critical friend to inform the ongoing development of the policy and make sure that it's on track all the time.
Okay, thanks for that, Ian. So there's an offer there, Tony, to discuss certain aspects of the policy. Ian, Louise, may I ask reference to the policy? When I first became a councillor all them years ago, I always remember, and it's not that long ago, people say, why have they got a property? I had my name in there. And I think we've all been there as councillors as well. It does happen a lot. These policies now, or this policy, and I think over the last number of years, have really helped them scenarios for us as members, as public figures as well, because it was really difficult when you couldn't explain why they got property from. I remember one from Hull. I think why have they come down from Hull and had a property my name's been on, so I think we are getting there. We're never going to be right, are we? Because you're never going to please everyone on these kinds of things. But hopefully we can get as near as possible. That's right, isn't it? If we can get as near as possible and try and help people the best we can. And I think we are getting there, to be honest with you, because it's a lot tighter now to go down them lines as what it used to be. And I think a lot of the amendments to the policy in here are good compared to what it used to be. So I thank you for that. It's got to go through cabinet, as you know, through Bob and discuss with his colleagues. So I don't think there's anybody else now. I've got Bob wants to come back in. Ian, you spoke. I've got Tony spoke. Bob.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm sorry, I had to take an urgent call during part of your discussion, and so I missed it. But I did hear the further contribution from Tony. And I hear very much what you're saying, and I will take it up with officers and with Ian in particular as a result of the comments you've made, Tony.
Thanks, Bob. All right, Tony. Thank you, Tony. Right, let's go to the recommendations. At the top of the page, sorry, I'm flicking the wrong page there. Right, recommendations. Number 1, to consider and comment on the proposed changes, see Appendix 1, given the regard to the meeting, the aims of the policy and contributing to the priorities of the council. Number 2, 2.2, where applicable, consider the report in respect of the recent changes in Welsh Government homeless policy and homeless demands to recommend that the Cabinet member adopts the proposed changes. Are we as members happy for that to go forward now to the Cabinet member for the changes in the policy as members of the committee? Yep. Anybody not, please show a hand. Yep, okay. I think we're unanimous there. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Louise and Ian, for your input into that report, and look forward to that being adopted by Cabinet and the Cabinet member very soon. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Right, agenda item number 5, homeless briefing report and emerging proposals for future delivery of homelessness within Monmouthshire. This is your report, Ian, yeah?
Yes, and I say I've got a presentation for the committee, one that I've presented to SLT and Cabinet previously. So that's the plan if you're happy with that.
Yep, I think we're fine, yep.
Sorry. Give it up. Can't see it yet, can you?
No.
No. Hazel, can you rescue me?
I can try. If you'd like to email it to me, Ian, I can send it round to all the committee now, and they can have it separately.
I've got it on the screen and press share content, and oh, there it is. Sorry, right. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, Ian. Right, you can start, Ian. Run through that with us.
Yeah, beg your pardon. Okay. Right, just to bring you up to speed. March time, we were issued with guidance from Welsh Government because of COVID, requiring us to accommodate anybody that was sleeping rough. And also we were required to accommodate anyone that was at risk of sleeping rough. And then subsequently, they've issued further guidance, which basically sets out a new Welsh Government policy for homelessness, which makes big changes for us. So we've got to continue to support those people that we've got in temporary accommodation, and again, anyone that comes along. And ultimately, we were required to improve the quality and the availability of our temporary accommodation. And some of the key changes is Welsh Government now expect homelessness to be brief and non-recurring. Louise has already touched on the principle of rapid rehousing, and they're also, the language is changing. They're talking about temporary homes as opposed to temporary accommodation. So, it's not about the bare necessities. People must feel safe and secure and have the ability to rebuild their lives. This is a couple of weeks out of date now, but I won't go through the slide line by line, but this gives a feel of our current situation. We have got well over 100 people now in temporary accommodation that need to move on, and the biggest change there is you'll see that we've got 85 singles, most of them single males, and that is a complete swing in the change of the profile of our of people in accommodation. As you'll see there, we've got a lot of people in bed and breakfast. The numbers in terms of accommodation have probably increased fourfold, and we've got 2 people sleeping on the floor in the night shelter as we speak. And again, one that is a concern certainly to us. I know Councillor Greenland is very concerned about it. Is the number of young people that we are dealing with at any one time. So these for us are significant numbers. And again, I just wanted to give you a sense of the scale that we have had to deal with homelessness since the end of March. Up until a few days ago, we have made 364 offers of accommodation, various different moves, but the scale of that is massive. It is enormous, and it's had a really big impact on the team. So just by way of summary, this slide is the accommodation gaps that we consider that we now have. We haven't got any emergency self-contained family accommodation. The only accommodation that we've got for young people are the solace schemes in Chepstow and Abergavenny. And whilst they provide a very good service and they provide an important service, there is a we needed more of a range of accommodation for young people. And to give you by way of example, during September, Solace had 5 empty properties, and we couldn't place at least 10 young people because of their needs. We've also got no dedicated accommodation for those with multiple needs. When I talk about multiple needs, I'm particularly talking about drug and alcohol abuse. They're probably the bigger ones, but high levels of mental health issues. Housing First, that's a particular type of accommodation. If you're not familiar with the term, basically people are allowed to fail. They can they're not at risk or very, very low risk of eviction because of their chaotic behaviour. And in general, again, the committee will be familiar with our just ongoing lack of accommodation anyway, but more so now, 1-bedroomed accommodation, both temporary and permanent. And then running alongside our accommodation is housing support. We have significant gaps with housing support at the moment, and this is a list of those gaps. We do have some temporary arrangements in place. The top 2, temporary accommodation and resettlement. We've got a goodwill arrangement in place with Pobble, which started over the summer, which is great. And again, going back to our high needs individuals with, say, like substance misuse, mental health, we've got some temporary multiple needs support through LMI in place at the moment. I mentioned earlier the young people. We've got a number of young people within our own stock, and we're of the view that they need a dedicated provision and not reliant on more general approach. I've mentioned Housing First, and just general support, just support generally for homeless people. We consider there's a need for more. And again, I mentioned mental health and substance misuse, to mention a couple. Lynn Webber is on the call, so Lynn will be available to say a few more words about housing support later. So I'm of the view that the council and Monmouthshire are facing significant risks in terms of homelessness at the moment. If nothing else, our expenditure on homelessness has spiked significantly, particularly due to the use of bed and breakfast, and we are using security / concierge service for some of our high needs applicants. We are able to claim from Welsh Government for those costs at the moment, but that obviously can't continue infinitum. Our current housing support programme, as I said, it doesn't align fully with our profile of homelessness at the moment, and I'm in regular conversation with Lynn Webber about how we can potentially change that. We have secured some temporary funding from Welsh Government, which is funding some of our interim support arrangements. And as we sit here at the moment, that funding is due to end in April, and there is nothing waiting in the wings for next year. Now, I think it will happen, but we've got no guarantees on that. So as we sit here, it is the funding ends in April. And as I said about young people, we consider there's a dedicated need for young persons accommodation support. And again, as we sit here, we're not able to fund. I keep mentioning reference to high need applicants. That does present us with challenges. Antisocial behaviour can be a problem, and it can have an impact on the local community. I know there's certainly been times when it's affected the police, for example, but we work regularly and we're in close contact with the police. But in relation to those high need applicants, we are very much reliant, or going to be reliant, on the housing associations going forward. They are making the case, though, that they are only equipped to provide low level and generic support. So the housing associations are looking to the council to make sure that there is adequate support in place. As I said, it's most definitely affected, certainly affected my team, and we haven't got the staffing capacity to deal with it properly at the moment. And one of the concerns going forward is the needs that we're identifying for housing support are higher needs. Will that impact on people with lower needs? Obviously, it's an important part of the provision that we've got at the moment, that people with lower needs are supported, and hopefully they won't get escalated. There's a danger at the moment with a reconfigured programme that those with lower needs, might be squeezed out. So as we sit here at the moment, we've got a number of interim arrangements. My focus at the moment is developing this transition plan. And obviously that's part of today's sharing that with you. We've needed to make some temporary staffing changes, which have been supported by the council and Welsh Government. And we continue to have, I suppose, operate on still on an emergency basis. You'll be aware that we use Gilwyn during the summer. I mean, that was really important. We continue to use the Market Hall in Monmouth. We are continually looking for B&Bs. Fortunately, we found one in Chepstow in the last week or so. We're using security, and I'll put that slide up there. We are considering and looking at whether we can use one or more pods to assist certainly one of the residents of the Market Hall, with a view to ending our use of the Market Hall. So not an ideal arrangement, certainly not permanent, but it gives you a feel of the how we're needing to think. As I said earlier, we're continually talking to Lynn Webber about how housing support aligns with homelessness, and Lynn's done a lot of work with providers to make some temporary changes, which we're doing through Pobble, and that's worked really, really well. And it's just ongoing conversations with the housing associations and private landlords. I won't go into this slide because it's very, very busy, but the point I really wanted to make here is that homelessness is far bigger than the housing options team. There's other parts of the council, there's other external services that are obviously relevant to how we deliver homelessness. And where there's an orange line, we think there's more work needs to be done. And where there's a red line, the arrangements are in their infancy and not developed sufficiently. But that is one of our focuses, is looking at the whole system. So one of those proposals that we've got at the moment is how can we strengthen homeless numbers, homeless prevention, and ultimately we need to reduce the number of people coming through for accommodation. Again, just to give you a feel, we've got 5 staff who between them have got 200 open cases. The time that those staff can give to those each of those cases is absolutely minimal, and partly the circumstances, a lot of people are homeless at the moment, but equally there are a number that we're not giving the thorough prevention attention that we would like to. But again, you'll appreciate there are so many challenges relating to preventing homelessness in Monmouthshire: affordability, the lack of choice, a number of applicants and advice agencies are not happy with what we accept, what we can offer. Some people present too late. Obviously, budget's a massive challenge. And one of the things that, again, I think this is a risk that the committee needs to be aware of, our ability to place sensitively and flexibly has been affected. So when we have safeguarding issues, community safety issues, again, it's a real challenge for the team in terms of where they're going to place somebody. And of course, at the end of the day, there's only so many houses in Monmouthshire that are going to come empty. And whether it's us, support agencies, whoever, everybody's fishing from the same pool. So the next few slides are the proposals that we are currently working to. Housing First, as I said, is a project for incredibly high needs people. We've got 6 at the moment, and Pobble is the dedicated support provider, and basically their challenge is to identify accommodation that is suitable for the individuals, but also is not going to be detrimental to neighbours. And that project's in its relatively early days, and I say the big challenge here is less so about the support, because the support is kicking in, but it's how we find the accommodation. And as I said earlier, we are looking at the moment for a pod for 1 gentleman, because we haven't got any accommodation to move them to. We need additional young persons accommodation. When I did this slide, we were working to a project in Abergavenny and with Melin. Melin had identified a site where we were going to develop 5 units of accommodation with some family accommodation, and we secured 300,000 support funding from Welsh Government. But this project unfortunately has fallen through because the owner of the land is asking for too high a valuation. So we've not been able to progress this. So it's back to the drawing board for young persons accommodation. Although we are intending to use some of our current accommodation for young people as a temporary measure. But so that would probably be one of our shared properties. The only emergency family accommodation that we've got in Monmouthshire at the moment is our hostel in Monmouth. That is currently being used for multiple needs accommodation. We haven't got any emergency self-contained accommodation. But we're working with housing association partners in this regard. As I said, unfortunately, there was going to be some properties on this site in Abergavenny, which has fallen through. But we have got a new scheme coming through in Cowdicott, which we hopefully are going to enter into a lease hopefully in the next few days. But that's really high quality accommodation and self-contained. But and obviously we need to identify further opportunities around that. Multiple needs accommodation. I would say this is one of our biggest challenges. So we're proposing that, or what we would like to do is convert the hostel in Monmouth to self-contained accommodation. We did bid for financial support from Welsh Government, but that was refused, unfortunately. So we're currently working with property services to work up costs, and we've also identified a property that we could potentially purchase. Again, whether that's feasible, I don't know, but we are in discussion with Peter Davis around the possibilities of this. We'd also like one in the south. We've not done any work on the one in the south, but we have identified a potential property that we could potentially work up a project. But I will say at this point, if we can't facilitate these type of projects, we will have real difficulty in rehousing quite a number of the people that we've currently got. And lastly, just more temporary accommodation, more permanent accommodation, and that list of bullet points there is a list of schemes that we are dealing with the housing associations. So the project in Garden City, that potentially can come in line in December. Again, it will be brand new accommodation, good quality, and then others within that list should come through over a period of time with a fair wind. Again, the one in italics is the one that's fallen through. Again, it's not straightforward with the accommodation with the housing associations. They're looking to the council to lease, which is fine from our perspective. It's doable, and we've got a track record of leasing. The only concerns is, though, again, there might be a financial risk or a financial implication as these schemes come online. So we do have a budget, but I'm flagging up now whether that budget will be adequate. I don't know. And just by way of example, the Garden City project would operate is due to operate at a deficit. I've touched on staffing. I think this is really important. It's pretty much since lockdown, our ability to have a full complement of mobile and visiting staff we've not achieved it. We've had staff quarantining, we've had staff sick, and on occasions we've had staff self-isolating. that's made it really difficult to do sign-ups, inspections, repair work, responding to antisocial behaviour. It's been really difficult, and as we sit here, that situation still exists. But it's important that I think that the situation is acknowledged from a well, both a health and safety and a welfare perspective on staff. It's been a really challenging period for them, very stressful, and really demanding. But they've done extremely well to get us to this stage. But looking ahead, we are mindful that there could be another spike in homelessness, probably more families, in relation to the end of furlough and potential restrictions in the private rented sector. We've already started having people present with their 6 months notice, and that we're expecting that to only increase. And obviously, by the fact that we're having to use B&B, our supply of accommodation is just insufficient for the level of demand. And just to make the last bullet point, we're developing this transition plan, and there's a number of initiatives. But our ability to work on those initiatives simultaneously, again, is challenging. Ideally, we need a dedicated resource to just throw them into doing homeless initiatives. So coming to a conclusion, again, this slide, it just really reflects the potential capital cost, and is really vague at this point. So we've had some initial costs of 285,000 to convert the hostel. I don't think it will be that high, but at the moment that needs to be worked up. And of course, the potential for purchasing another property to complement our current property. And then again, with what we've identified in the south, we don't know as yet whether that is an option at all. I was asked to provide some possibilities around what our staffing needs would be going forwards. I haven't detailed those, but we consider that, in an ideal scenario, we would need probably another 8 members of staff to do various pieces of work, and that's the value we consider that of those staffing implications. So the other list of bullet points are the projects that we're currently operating temporarily and due to end in April. That second bullet point, RSL leasing, I've probably over-egged that a little bit. It's probably not as high as £50,000, but again, the point I'm trying to make there is there could be a deficit if we take on additional leased accommodation. So, in conclusion, these are what we consider are the priorities: the housing options, staffing, multiple needs accommodation, and young people accommodation. And concluding reflections: what could the situation be like on the 1st of April? Will we have access to sufficient social housing, particularly 1-bedroom? We don't think so. Are we going to have access to sufficient private rented accommodation? It's unlikely. Will we have secured some additional temporary and supported accommodation? We believe we will, but how far that will we have adequate? There's still a lot of work to do there. One area of risk is, will we need to end the security that we've got for our high needs applicants? And will we be continuing to rely heavily on the B&Bs? And as I sit here at the moment, I think we will be. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian, for that comprehensive presentation. And from myself and probably everyone out there, just thank the team for all their hard work. And I know it's not easy out there, and it's not going to get any easier. And hopefully stick together and we can get through this, and hopefully people out there can get some good support from yourselves, as they always have. And we'll have to take the journey all together on this one, because as a council, the cabinet, and as councillors as well, it's very trying, and there's a lot of vulnerable people out there, and we are relying on you and your team to just help the best they can, which they are doing, and hopefully we can continue that. I've got a couple of members who want to speak. I've got Ruth, and then I've got Maureen, and a cabinet member wants to speak, and I'm sure he'll have some things to say. Just one question I want to ask you, Ian. How much do them pods cost? What's the approximate on one of the container pods? I've seen them about place. How much are they? A general rough.
You know, I don't know. I think we rent them. I think Jane's on the line. Is Jane on the line? No. I think there's a rental charge of like 120, 150 £150 a month, something like that, if I remember right.
So we like lease them. If you want one, you can lease one. Is that what it is?
You don't buy them. You rent them. So obviously, I mean, the less you have it, the cheaper it is. So.
Yeah, so they can be lifted on and off and transported wherever you want them, or what would you do? Make a little compound with some on just to house.
Literally, it comes on the back of a truck, it's fairly easy to plug them in as so to speak. I'd say I haven't got any experience of them. And I know talking to planning colleagues, we've always balked against the idea of them. And let's be honest, we haven't really got anywhere suitable for them. But in the context of this discussion, it's an absolute last resort. And just purely, it would just be purely an interim measure to empty the market hall and provide accommodation until we can find something suitable.
Yeah, so the electric and water to them will be supplied reference to. So if you're going to supply one, you could supply a few of them as well, couldn't you?
Yeah, I mean, if you where we were thinking about one location, it was next door to a council, a council building. So this is me talking, but I think it would be quite easy to connect it to the electrics and with a water supply. Obviously, if it's away from other services, you'd need to have temporary arrangements such as obviously foul disposal and potential generator or potential water supply. Of course, if you need to do that increases the cost.
Yeah, okay. All right, thanks for that, Ian. Right, I've got Ruth, and then Bob, and then Maureen. Ruth.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Ian. It's quite a long and detailed report again from you. Gosh, we've been on this committee now since 2004. I think Roger Harris and I are long standing on it, so we've seen some changes, and especially with the bed and breakfast. I'm very concerned about the bed and breakfast because obviously that's a great cost to us. Is there no means of accommodating, because the pods are very small from what I've seen of them, and as you said, you can't put them just anywhere. and using, I believe, like holiday parks and so on have like not caravans, but a bit more like a static caravan that could accommodate for several weeks if we purchase some of those and put them in obviously the appropriate place. But I should think that would be better than bed and breakfast, more cost effective. And especially if you've got, you know, sort of a small family or something, I would have thought I would prefer to go into something like that than in a pod. But I don't know whether you can purchase those sorts of things. And again, that's where would you put them? But obviously, bed and breakfast, I should think, is a great cost now, and it's most probably going to raise even further. We are going to have more homes repossessed because furlough isn't going to be what it was. People are going to not just be reduced in furlough, they're obviously going to be made redundant, and I know a few of those. And so also with, I know the one on Cinderhill Street, I don't know if it looks as if there's anybody actually in there at the moment, and the refurbishing of that would almost sort of equate to almost building a purpose-built place, because it's still not in an ideal position, and to you know, redo that would be very costly, I should imagine. But I would think, with things looking very dire for the future, at the moment anyway, foreseeable future till next year, the council is going to be very, very strapped for money to accommodate it all that it's required of them at the moment with homeless people, and we're going into winter. So there's no easy answer, Ian, I'm afraid, but I do know the pods, and I do know they're quite small, but there again, you have to think of sewerage and electric, and are they near any sort of town or bus route or something that they would require. So it's quite a big thing to look for. But if we had something like more static caravans that could be for a short term in an agreement and then move it on, but the pods to rent will be working out quite costly, I should think. Anyway, that's my input to it. So the best of luck, Ian. I think you're going to need all the help you can get on this one. Thank you.
Thanks, Ruth. Bob, I'll let you come in before members, because I know you've probably got a lot to absorb here, Bob.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Look, I know that at select committee meetings, cabinet members should be seen and not heard, but I did just want to come in and, first of all, just underline the stress and the work that this team has been under. These officers are really people, and they care. They care about these people who are homeless, and the amount of work that they have put in over since we went into lockdown in particular, is enormous. And I see Sarah Jones is on the call. Sarah has also got responsibilities within this area because she has cabinet responsibilities for social justice. And she and I have been having very regular updates on the situation from Ian. And we've also made cabinet colleagues aware of the situation as well. In fact, we have a twice a week informal cabinet meeting now. And very recently, Ian was at one of those. And so cabinet is well aware of the circumstances that we face at the moment. And just to answer somebody, I think, who asked on the chat, yeah, the situation has been made much worse by the pandemic. At an early stage, the Minister, Julie James, gave money, and we're really grateful for this, for taking people off the streets. That was so important. But what we have found during the pandemic is that people who are sofa surfing, as infection rates in the spring grew, then actually people didn't want people just sofa surfing in their homes. And so you found that these people presented overnight as homeless. And I can see that as we go further into this situation moving forward, we are going to be in real problems this autumn and winter. But as Ruth has pointed out, there's no easy answers here. The council has huge calls on its limited resources at the moment. But we do recognise as a priority the issues that are faced in this area of council work in particular, and we will be doing everything that we can to try and meet the very high demands that we have. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Bob. Maureen?
Whoops. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman. It's just slightly different aspect, but first of all, I'd like to add to Bob's tribute to the officers and everybody combined, because it's such a big issue to cope with, and they are wonderful. So we thank you very much. I'm looking at a different side of it, really. I'm thinking about all the people who, because of their losing their jobs, are going to be struggling to pay their mortgage and may even lose their properties. Is there any way that anything can be done to persuade the banks and the building societies to be more lenient and to give them more time? Because otherwise they're going to be added to our homeless, and that's going to make things even worse than they are now. And it is a great worry. There was a program yesterday on the radio about people that have been starting to buy their own houses, and they were allowed to have a deposit of 5% and go from there. And a couple of them, because the actual sale hadn't gone through, were then told they had to have 15% before they could buy. And they were really, you know, they don't seem to be being very lenient, the building societies. I know they've got a business to run, but I don't know if anything can be done about it. We don't want even more homeless people.
Yeah, I mean this is an area I consider that we need to invest in, because if we do get people coming through with those circumstances, we need to be doing everything to be working with them and supporting them. And part of that would be to engage with the likes of banks and building societies and support them with potential debts. There are a few there's a few schemes coming out of Welsh Government, albeit it's like going to be loans with like a 1% interest rate, but it is on the radar. But I say we will need the staffing to go into that. But another dimension of that is obviously the council's housing support arrangements. Again, they will work very closely with people in those circumstances as well. Again, Lynn is on the line, so again, I don't know whether Lynn wants to add to that from a housing support perspective.
Yeah, good morning all. Well, just to re-emphasise really what Ian has said this morning, that as a result of the new guidance that's come out from the Welsh Government at the start of the pandemic, I and my team have worked very closely with Ian and his team in order to realign services to support those in temporary accommodation. We've had support from both Melin, from Monmouthshire Housing and Sulamai, and worked to ensure that those in the temporary accommodation are supported where appropriate. In realigning those services, of course, they had a caseload and they have to continue working with that caseload as well. So it's caused a great deal of stress and anxiety to those teams. But I must say that they've stepped up to the mark, and it's been very encouraging where we are at the moment. And going forward, we are looking to make that a more permanent position. It is very difficult under the housing support grant, which, as you know, is formally supporting people, that we have to comply to the grant's terms and conditions. And there is a requirement on us to do preventative work, supporting domestic violence and domestic abuse, older people, young people, and etc. So it's a very fine balancing act that we're working with, and we commissioned some outstanding services, mental health services with the farmers, again, to prevent homelessness. So, but we are working closely with Ian to support the work that he and his team are doing.
Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you.
Okay with that answer, Maureen? Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Right, Louise.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I wanted to also say, thank you very much to Ian and his team for all the hard work they've done. It's obviously a very challenging time, not only because of COVID, but also obviously the new Welsh Government policies on it, on the aim that everybody really wants to go to is for permanent accommodation for people who need it. In terms of the young people, you mentioned the problems of multiple needs, sort of drug and alcohol and so forth. And also the Gwent drug advisory project. What support do you get from the Gwent drug advisory project? And basically, in terms of its funding, because it's a medical need in some senses, alcohol and drug dependency, are you getting any support from the health board? Or, for example, I think the Police and Crime Commissioner tends to give grants in these sort of types of area, and has that been explored as well?
Yeah, we've probably at the beginning of COVID, I'd say that our relationships or the arrangements with GDAS were probably not as they should be, and we have been working closely with GDAS around their existing provision, and no surprise, their existing provision just wasn't. They just didn't have the capacity for the number of people that we know now that need support. But we have secured funding from Welsh Government until April. So we've got a dedicated homeless GDAS worker who will focus on our B&Bs and our temporary accommodation. So we've got, as things are at the moment, we've got that until April. But other authorities are having similar issues to ourselves, and the conversation has started about a Gwent project of some description. I can't tell you what that's going to look like, but the need for it is well understood, and work is going on to hopefully develop that, and at its most basic, hopefully try and keep it going. But if it doesn't continue, or there is a risk of it not continuing in April, I will say again, that is a risk for us, definitely.
Could I ask another question, Chair?
Yes, no problem.
I was just wondering, because of the change in Welsh Government policy, is that the reason why you're talking about, obviously the Market Hall was a night shelter and I was just thinking that and then you were talking about the pods, was that because of the idea that they don't want night shelters, even though they might well be needed?
It's a bit of both, really. I want to end the use of the night shelter because that's what it is. It's not the sort of, it's not adequate accommodation for the residents. But you're right, Welsh Government are now, I was going to use the word outlawing, but they're certainly doing everything to cease the use of night shelters. Some local authorities are arguing that there will still be a need, but obviously the issue at the moment is obviously COVID safe premises. So, but yeah, they are simplistically saying they don't want night shelters anymore, but equally they're actually also saying they don't want pods. So, but they've said to us that if we do need to go down the road because the circumstances are a little bit unusual in this instance, there would be, they will consider it.
Yeah, I would have thought they'd have got more support from a night shelter than being in a pod, actually.
Yeah, I know some authorities are arguing against the recommendation.
Permanent is obviously better, but you need that safety net as well, presumably.
Absolutely, and I suppose what it's doing is just highlighting our lack of provision and the type of accommodation that we've got, and we're pretty confident that this policy change is here to stay, because Welsh Government seem to be moving away from intentional homelessness and moving away from priority need. So pretty much anybody needing accommodation is going to have to be provided accommodation.
It's a good policy as long as you get all the resources you need, basically, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I don't know anybody. I don't know any officers. I don't know any members that are against it or disagree with it. But it has to be resourced, and obviously to do it so quickly has created challenges for everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Louise. I have Sheila Woodhouse, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. You just answered the question I was going to make about night shelters, Ian, but I was very interested in that. And I just wanted to add my thanks to you and your team and all the teams that support people, because to be homeless is bad enough at any time, but with this pandemic, it is just so very worrying. And it's good to know that people like yourself are so committed to looking into all of these areas. I do know last winter some of the local churches provided emergency accommodation. I know that I appreciate we prefer people to be in more permanent accommodation, but churches are currently closed for this fortnight. But are there any agencies that could be offering assistance, given the thought of a winter fast approaching? As I say, I know it's not ideal, but I'm reflecting back on last year, and there was some accommodation actually here in Abergavenny, as well as what you described in Monmouth. And
yeah.
I understand the comments about why Monmouth isn't seen to be acceptable. Yeah. That was my question, but you covered that.
I mean, as a council, we cannot actively use such provision going forwards. A church can do it on their own back, and we would have no control or influence if a church decided that they wanted to do that. But we couldn't place and we couldn't provide support funding.
Okay. Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Chair.
Sheila, yeah. Okay. Right. I've got Ruth with your hand back up. Ruth, you want to come back in? You're on mute.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, for allowing me to come back in. Just the thing about the accommodation, the overnight accommodation. I think the ones in Monmouth that was in a council property anyway, but I think the category perhaps is a little different to homelessness and rough sleeping. I think the issue was trying to make sure, like in the cities, you get a lot of rough sleepers. And in the winter, they try to get them off the street into some sort of shelter from weather concerns as well as anything else. And I think maybe there's a little bit of a difference. Some of those people do not want to go into permanent accommodation, but in the winter is more of a health and safety issue. And they're quite amenable then to have some sort of shelter as a rough sleeper, than sort of being still categorized as under the umbrella as being homeless. But and I know it is difficult, and we have accommodated several in the market hall in Monmouth, and with the church, I believe, has been helping to accommodate them with food and all those sorts of necessary things that they require. But I can see, Ian, we're needing more staff and more resources. And really, it's when you come up against these sort of homelessness that we appreciate all the work, and they must be tearing their hair out sometimes, especially now as we go into winter. And with the COVID, it's going to be far more difficult for maybe a family member that might be even willing to take somebody in sort of in the short term. But with COVID, even that might not be appropriate for somebody who's elderly or isolating. All sorts of other things are in the mix now, which might not have been the case for helping somebody in the interim who's becoming homeless. Thank you, Ian, for all your work and all your team. I can't say it enough, as I know over the years you have been, you know, a stalwart for all of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Ruth. That's some kind comments. Maureen, you want to come back in? Nope, you don't. Right. As the cabinet member for communities, Sarah, has she gone back off? She was on. Sarah, no, she's back off. She's sorry. Okay, Bob said. Okay, Ian, I just had a look there. Swift do some lovely pods. I think when you go out in the marketplace, when I saw that container there, I thought it was a little bit crude, which I surmise it is, but it's temporary accommodation to get somebody out of a problem. I mean, they come in and they set them up, and at least you've ticked a box there, and somebody's got a roof over their head for the night and a bit of heating or whatever. But actually out there are some nice pods out there. I think Swift do a lovely pod. I've just had a look on the website there, like a two berth pod with all the bits and pieces, about 20-something thousand pounds, like, but they can be transported around. I know a lot of these sites, these caravan sites, I think they have a lot of them on their sites nowadays as accommodation. So there are different aspects out there of trying to find accommodation. But a lot of these places we're looking at, probably in the winter, they cost a fortune to even heat, don't they? Because you're not just heating one room there. You've got to heat a variety of things there. How do people go on for washing and things like that then on these? Do they have to go, let's say, for washing clothes? How does all that happen then?
I'm not overly familiar, but I believe there's one in Newport, and there's actually a pod which is set up as like a utility pod, so people can go and do the washing and drying in a separate pod. But yeah, all of these, it just creates management implications. Yeah. So the bigger it gets, again, it's something else to be mindful of. I mean we know B&B isn't suitable and ideal, but the management implications are a lot lower.
Yeah. You can control it probably a lot better, can't you?
Yeah, and everything's on site, everything's provided, etc., etc.
Okay, right. Have anybody else like to speak? There's reference to the report. We just have to go through the recommendations there, 2.1 to 2.7. There'll be a final report, Ian, that's right, which will be going to Cabinet in the near future. I don't know when that will be, do you?
No, I was having a conversation with Francis this morning, and I know that there is it's considered appropriate to go to Children's and Young People Select because of the issue with young people, which seems completely appropriate. Yeah. So if that happened, I think Hazel said it was the 8th of December if that happened, and then assumedly Cabinet after that. But that would be that's a change to what was originally planned.
Okay, so we're talking early New Year, perhaps. Yes.
I would suspect so.
Okay.
So
all right.
Council agreement's happy with that.
Yeah. Okay. Right, okay, so we'll go from 2.1 to 2.7. Are we all in agreement with all them recommendations there? Anybody who's not, please show hand if we are in agreements. Yep, okay. All right. Right, we seem to be fine with that. So we're recommendations 2.1, 2.7, we're all agreed. And thank you to your team, Ian, and keep up the good work. And hopefully we could see things improving for a lot of people out there. If not, least we'll be there for them to follow up with, and we can help them out the best we can with this difficult period we're going through. Okay, members, everybody happy with that? Thanks, Ian, and thanks, Louise, and thanks, Bob. We'll just get into the rest of the agenda now. I've got the confirm the minutes of the previous meeting to follow, which we've all had. Everybody happy with them minutes? I think, Louise, you've got an amendment you'd like to make within them minutes. Louise?
Yeah, sorry, I can't get into the minutes at the moment. It's just not letting me access them. It was just the point about I made at the last meeting. I think it said about public housing, whereas it should have said any housing. It was the point about the new National Development Framework mentioning over at least 50 houses per hectare in urban areas. And you know, the draft National Development Framework, and it said somewhere in the minutes about public housing. Well, it would just apply to all housing, that.
Okay.
So it's just basically urban housing would be better than public housing.
Okay. Are we happy for that amendment when we have it there?
Yeah, sorry, I can't get access to my.
Yeah, I don't have any issues with the amendment there. Is the committee happy with that amendment just being put in there? Louise sends it over to Democratic just to put that amendment in the minutes. Yeah. 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 Okay. Okay, Louise, thanks for that. So we're happy to agree the minutes of the meeting previous. Yeah. Anybody who's not, just please show a hand. If you're all happy, right? Okay, we'll agree then minutes as a true and accurate record of that meeting we had there. Right. Can we just look at the forward work programme, please? Now, I was under the impression with an email we had a few weeks ago that we would have updates to the planners on a Friday. I didn't see none this Friday, but I know the email I received yesterday from John Pearson, Democratic Services, are having a bit of a struggle at the moment with staffing, with issues which have arisen through COVID. So I don't know whether we'll be having them updates on the Friday to the planner. So if we're happy with the planner that we've got before us, scrutiny, which we've done the 20th of October, the allocations possible. Now we've got the Gypsy Travellers Assessment. Hazel, do you want to just run through this with us, please? That's another Ian Batewell and Steve Griffiths one. Have we anything there which is going to come to us, Hazel?
Hopefully, Chair, that will come to us for our December meeting. Some of the members will be aware that we've been working on that for the best part of about 18 months. We had some workshops and we had some training as well. And we also went and did some site visits. So it's a culmination of a piece of work that's been ongoing through the previous chair as well. So hopefully that will come to you in December, and I think that's quite long awaited. So the officers have actually just left the call, so we can't confirm that right now, but I shall do that after the meeting, Chair. I think it should be enough of a discussion really to have a meeting solely on that, but something might come in the meantime. Just to let you know that the report that you've had on homelessness today, Ian and I have discussed whether that should go to CYP Select Committee also, and we feel there's implications for young people and that it would be worth taking that there. So just for you to be aware that's happening, and it'll be a more rounded discussion if we take it to both selects.
Okay, yeah, he did mention that, Ian, during our summing up there. Yeah, thanks for that, Hazel. Now, have we anything on budget proposals? Because we did have a meeting cancelled, didn't we, on the budget scenarios? Is there anything on this one where we are with budgets, etc.?
You'll have the budget scrutiny that will take place in January, but I believe they were trying to rearrange the seminar that was cancelled, which was on budget recovery plans. So two separate things, the usual budget scrutiny next year, but the budget recovery plans was particularly a piece of work to look at where we are currently, and particularly following COVID, and how we're going to recover some of those costs. So we'll try and chase up that date. I believe it was cancelled last week and is due to be rescheduled.
Okay, thanks for that then. So we just got the Gypsies and Traveller assessment to come to us, and then budget recovery plans, hopefully. That will be before the new year. Is there anything else? Any members got anything they feel that we should put on the planner? Or you anything? Have we any other policies coming forward before before cabinet, which we probably need to look at? We'll have to put on here, yes.
Yes, we'll look at anything coming forward, Chair. I have just had a conversation with Councillor Pavia, and I think he feels off the back of the discussion today that we ought to be asking the Health Board what they're doing in terms of delivering on substance misuse. I think there's, the sort of sense that this is a shared sort of responsibility, and that we need to be asking partners what role they're playing as well. So I don't think Councillor Pavia thought that should be something covered in the meetings that I'm regularly sending to you, that Councillor Brown is forwarding. We feel that we should be asking some specific questions. So I think that's one to add to the work programme, Chair.
Okay, and I've had an email reference to support for dementia during the period we've just had from March on. What support the council's been providing for people with dementia? Is that continuing, or has it had to go? Has it had to be? Well, what support we're offering for dementia people out there, people who've got dementia or the first signs of dementia. So I don't know what members feel about that one, whether we should just ask for a small report covering where we are with the support for people out there with dementia.
Yeah, I think it's also support for their carers as well, who haven't got the same support going to different activities.
Yeah, that's a valid point, that, Louise. Anything else on that one? Hazel, could we pull that together then with our team there? What support we've been offering for dementia patients and their carers in the last 6-7 months?
Yes, Chair, I can go away and have a look at that.
Yep, thanks. Anybody else got any comments? Anything they feel that we need to perhaps just take a look at? Only small reports. I mean, we're getting to a big depth, but it gives us an insight of where we are, because we need to keep our views and our assessments of where we are with these important topics. Roger, I got Roger. Rog.
Thanks, Chair. It's just going back a long way now, because I had my hand up and you missed it. Just to put on record my appreciation of what Ian and his team have done for me as a county councillor over the years from 2004, and for residents that have needed their support. It's been unstinting the whole time, and I just wanted to put on record my appreciation of what he and his team has done. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Roger. I didn't see your hand there, Roger, so I'm sorry about that one. Okay. Right, anything else, anybody? Nope. No hands. Speak up now, because I've only got Roger's hand still up. No, nobody else's hand up. Right. Okay, so we got enough to go on there. So hopefully we'll have one item for our meeting in December, and we may have some reports coming back on the two issues there, one from Paul and the one on dementia and carers also. Right. The planner. Let me just go into that there, which we've just done. For work planner, council and cabinet. Let's just have a look at the cabinet work programme, see if there's anything in there. Just a second. This is the one which we're supposed to have on a Friday, so hopefully we may see something there. The LDP, which we discussed today, there's nothing on there at all. It's all for next year, which is understandable, really. No, I've got nothing on the cabinet forward work planner reference to which is raising anything for us. Right, everybody happy with that? Yep. Okay, we got our next meeting 15th of December. Everybody happy with that? The time 10:30, pre-meeting 9:45. Yep. Yep. Right. Thank you, everyone, and thanks for your time this morning, and stay safe, everyone. Thanks for our two members who join us today, not the council members, for your input, and thanks to the officers for all your time, and we'll see you all on Thursday.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Bye.
Thanks to our officers as well. Thanks,
Thank
Aidan.
you.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.